Hello and welcome to the Junk Dori tutorial. This Junk Dori is basically like a traveler's notebook, except the inserts are little mini junk journals, and the size is not of a typical traveler's notebook. It ends up being about 5.5 by 9 inches. So we're just hopping right in here. I am using a Manilla envelope for the cover. This measures 12 inches by 9 inches. I have it scored at 5.5 inches and 6.5 inches. If you got the Junk Trunk kit, yours is already scored. I have my binding template here. I have some twine that I'm going to use for binding. And I will go over all of the supplies as we go along, but I will have a main list of supplies down below. I've used a bunch of different techniques to get this faux leather look, and I will show you the different supplies that I have used to get different looks as we go along. For this, I am going to be using the Dylusions Ink spray. However, I've also tried out the Distress Ink pads, and I've also tried out a paint. This is a distress paint. I just want to show you that you can try and use different supplies that you have at home. And of course, for the leather look, I am going for a brown look. So honestly, whatever art supplies you have that are brown, I would give it a try. I'm using some sealer. This is acrylic sealer. It's a matte finish. But you can also use something like Modge Podge, or there is a multi-medium matte as well that I did not try, but I think it would work well. So I'm just starting out by spraying my manila envelope with quite a bit of ink, and I'm going to use a sponge to just really work that into the surface. You know, the thing that's going to give this an actual leather look is the variation in color throughout the cover. So don't worry about it being like super uniform, and just go with kind of like what you think that you want it to look like. So I'm just doing circular motions here and spreading out the ink. I am going to dry in between coats. So I did this coat and then I let it dry. This is the cover that I experimented with paint, and on the left hand side is the Dylusions paint mixed with ink. On the right hand side is just the Dylusions paint by itself. This is the paint, or sorry, it's distress paint. And it was not really something I was loving, so I decided to add some ink. I used distress ink, but you could also use an inexpensive brown stamp ink. You can see on this left side that it looks a lot more like leather. Now I did spray the matte sealer over that left side as well, and I will show you in a few moments here how I added the ink over the paint. I did, again, let that dry in between coats. Now I don't want to get too confusing here going back and forth between different things, but I just wanted to show you that you can get this desired look by using different products so that you can use what you have. And earlier I had shown the Modge Podge. I was just mentioning that you could also try that out. It is going to leave more of a tacky feel. So I am going to take my ink pad and I'm putting this right on top that side where I just had one layer of paint. I am simply stamping that on, and then I'm going to use my sponge and kind of mix it in circular motions. Even though the finish on top of that paint is not like super dry, it does hold the ink pretty well, and especially since I am going to seal it, that sealer is really what holds everything in. I realized that my sponge was a little wet because I used the same sponge that had the distress spray, so I'm just trying to get some of that off, but the distress ink does well mixed with water, so it kind of turns it into like a watercolor, which you could also experiment and use brown watercolor if that's what you have. I just want to encourage you to use what you have and just experiment and have fun with it. These manila envelopes are quite durable, and I feel like they can take quite a bit. I slowly build up the color and just continue adding more layers of the ink until I get the desired look that I am going for. And you can see that it's starting to match that left side now. And I think it just looks so much better once I added that layer of ink, because the paint alone It just didn't look like fake leather to me at all, but I think that you could make it work. You could try mixing paint with Modge Podge or something like that. And I think that pretty sure I've seen a tutorial on that before. Once you're satisfied, you will want to seal with either the Modge Podge or matte sealer so that that ink doesn't spread off. You can see I have ink here on my hands on the side that was not sealed. But before I do that, I wanted to take some black ink. This is Memento dye ink, and I am going to ink up the edges. I'm also going to fold the journal so that I can ink up the edges around the spine. I think that this adds a lot, and you can even take some of the black ink and sponge over parts of the journal cover just to give even more depth. That's really what we're building up on here, and that's what is going to give that faux leather appearance. So just definitely take your time with this. I had so much fun trying out a couple different techniques, and I really hope that you guys will try out just using what you have at home. So once you're done with that, you definitely want to leave it out to dry. Mine took just a couple hours, and I did enjoy and use the matte sealer. Okay, so I'm moving back now to the Dylusions spray cover. And you can see here that it's not as dark as that last one. I am wanting to add more depth to this. So again, I am just starting by layering on some more ink. Like I said, I wanted it to dry in between so that it didn't get too worn out. And so I'm realizing that I wanted some darker spots. If I had another darker brown ink, I probably would have used that, but I just had the one color. It's melted chocolate. And so I just worked with that, and I found that it actually worked well with just the one color. You could also do this technique to the inside of the manila envelope if you wanted your front and back to have the faux leather appearance. I knew that I was going to be covering the inside of mine, so I didn't really worry too much about doing the inside. However, I did try and ink up the edges and make them a little bit darker, and I kind of brought that into the inside just a little bit, if that makes sense. Just so the border that's around the paper that I cover it with would show that ink and kind of flow. So I have cut down some pieces to cover the inside. I have my spine piece. It's around 3 1/4 by 9 inches, and then the two pieces are about 5 1/4 by 9 inches. I am wanting to utilize this flap here. So what I'm doing is I am taking the paper that I'm going to be covering, and I traced that flap, and I am going to cut that out. That way I can glue that piece down, and then the other piece that's underneath is going to just match up perfect. There's probably a bunch of different ways you could do this, but I made sure to punch that hole back through. And then you can go ahead and glue down your matted pieces here. I did want to add a charm ring, so I didn't glue down the center spine piece yet. I am going to use my binding template that's for the Traveler's Notebook style journal, and I am going to just punch a hole where the charm hole is. So I'm using a tack here. I just wanted to show you that you can use what you have at home. If you don't have an awl, you can use whatever you have to poke a hole. And I'm going to take my ring fastener. This is something that was included in the junk trunk kit. And I'm going to just pop it through that little hole that we punched a hole. And if you didn't use the binding template, it's basically 1/2 inch in towards the center, and it's about 1/4 inch down. So now I'm going to decide if I want to add anything else to my cover. I'm just showing you some different botanical and bird pages that I thought would be really cute on the page, but I actually decided to leave mine pretty blank, minus I add a couple vintage buttons. And I loved the look of this, so I'm just going to take a thread and needle and stitch those on. Keep it really simple. That bird page that I had showed you for a moment, that is one of the pages that comes in the kit. Not that exact page, but something like that. And I thought that would have ended up being so cute. I started to make a third journal that had a bird image, and I need to finish that. So I'm not worried about covering up the thread from the inside because I am going to put a library card there, so I just don't worry about that right now. And now I am going to take my binding template, and if you can ignore those holes that I have right there, I accidentally used the wrong template. I used the template for the regular junk journal, but I'm just showing you guys that it's okay. We can move on. So I'm going to use the correct template now. This is the template for the Traveler's Notebook style journal. And I'm going to punch the 2 holes at the top and then the 2 holes at the bottom. I will have the measurements here on the screen and down below in case you did not print your template or you just don't want to use it. It is easy enough to measure those holes. The reason why the first set of holes were not going to work, they were too far down towards the middle and we would have had to use pretty short pages. I wanted my pages to be around 8.5 inches. So that's why that didn't work, but it's okay. I will cover those holes right there at the end and it looks fine. I did punch the middle hole also because I wanted to use an elastic closure. And by the way, the elastic does not come in the kit. It does come with embroidery floss, which you can use, but I will say using some elastic cording is probably going to work out better. I am going to use the embroidery floss to show you that you can use it, and this is going to be the binding that will hold the inserts in. So you want to string one end of the thread through the top hole on the right hand side, and you're going to just pull it through a little bit. Go ahead and take the other end and you will string that through the hole, the top hole on the left hand side. And then you can pull both ends through all the way on the inside cover. And then from the inside, you are going to take just one of the ends of the string and string it through the bottom hole. Take that same end and then string it through the hole that is next to it to bring it back inside. And now you can just go ahead and tie the 2 loose ends together and just leave them alone for now. We will need to readjust these and probably trim quite a bit once we know what size we are going to have our inserts. So you can just kind of tie those off just to leave them be for now. Now you can see that we have 2 sides that we can slip inserts into. And I'll just kind of show you here with a piece of paper that will just slide right under and we have those 2 sides. I will show you now how to add an elastic closure from that center hole. And this was just something that I wanted to do for my dory. You don't have to add this kind of closure, but it is nice. So I'm going to take my elastic and I have about 18 inches. I fold it in half and at that area where it's folded together, you are going to push that through that inside middle hole. I'm going to use my awl here just to kind of poke it through that center hole. And so you can just poke that through. And then on the outside, you will kind of estimate what size you want. You want it to be able to easily fit around the entire dory. And again, we can adjust this later when we have our inserts finished so that we know kind of how fat our dory is going to be with something in it. So I just wanted to have that kind of set up, and I will loosely knot it on the inside so that it will stay in place. So I just use a really simple knot to hold that into place. And then we can close this up and set it aside. It's already looking so cute. And now it is time to start working on our inserts. I will also working on covering up those holes that I didn't mean to punch. I wanted to sidetrack really quick to show you what to do if you wanted to cover your inside with fabric, in case you wanted the faux leather look but you wanted a regular junk journal cover. So I'm just going to trim some muslin down here, and I am simply just going to add a bunch of glue it on starting at the center here, and then just adding glue to each side and pressing out that muslin. Because I think this faux leather look is something that I definitely want to use again for another junk journal, and I just thought that some of you might want to use the faux leather look but in a regular junk journal style. Okay, so now it is time to move on to the inserts. Damn it, phone. I have gathered just a bunch of things that I want to include in my inserts. I have graph paper, lined paper, manila envelopes, some book pages, map pages, different envelopes, and glassine bags. I have some printed out digital kits and lace and just a huge selection of things. So kind of gather all of your materials, anything that you think you might want to use. I have some really pretty book images and illustrations here as well. And I am going to show you some different ways that you can take these really basic supplies and use them to decorate your pages. And then I have a separate video that will go into depth on decorating book pages as well. I am going to start out by just trimming down all of the pages that I want to use for my inserts, and I cut them to be 10.5 inches by 8.5 inches, so that when we fold them we will have our pages be 5.25 by 8.5. So that's going to be a little bit smaller than the cover, and that's going to fit perfectly inside of those inside of the binding that we have in our dory. So here I go. I'm cutting real fast, guys. Keep in mind that you don't have to do your journals the same order that I do. This is just what works for me. And once you get going a couple times and practice a few times, you will find the order that works best for you. Once I cut everything down, I fold it in half because we will want those folded in half for our signatures, which are basically going to be our inserts. And as I mentioned, I do have a video going in depth on 10 different page decorating ideas. You can check that out. Right now I'm going to just use some of these very basic supplies like the different ephemera pieces, those addition cards, and I have some game pieces here, and I am just going to use those to decorate these very basic pages. I like the look. I think that it ends up looking really vintage, and it's also really simple, so you can just have a lot more room to play when you are actually using this for memory keeping or journaling or whatever it's going to be used for. I'm taking a gorgeous printed card here. This is from Lindsay Zanor's Etsy shop, and she is the Junk Journal Artist of the Month for the Junk Trunk. And I am going to just cut out her card, and I cut out a little notch, glue around the edges, and there we have a pocket. So every month the Junk Trunk will have a featured junk journal artist, and I knew from the start that I wanted Lindsay to be the very first. She is super talented. She makes amazing tutorials and shares so much on YouTube. Her shop has just a variety of junk journals. She has digital kits now, and she is always adding more to her shop. So be sure to check her out. So I'm getting back to decorating. I'm using a vintage page here, and I am just folding it in half. Then I fold a corner down, and then you have this little multi-pocket pocket that can go on a page. And you know, sometimes I kind of go all crazy, but it is really nice to use basic supplies and use your imagination more than anything. So that's what I'm doing here. Now we have a couple different places that you can tuck things away on this pocket. And then when you just glue down the 3 sides, you even have a pocket in the back of this one. Of course, I am going through this kind of quick just because I don't want these videos to be too long for you guys. Next, I am going to decorate a multi-pocket accordion envelope. Now, I have a full tutorial showing you how I make this, but I did include 3 envelopes and some tags and things in the Junk Trunk kit so that you could make these, but again, basic supplies, so if you don't have the kit, you can also make one of these. And I am just going to use a botanical page to decorate the top of this pocket. And then I think that these pockets are so much fun to put on the page of a junk journal page. You have the pockets on the sides, and then you have a spot for a tag in the front. Okay, and now I am going to just cut up some more of that book page. I think this is a piece of botanical page, and I place it on the side I use one of Lindsay's journaling cards, and I am just going to glue that down at the bottom, and this is going to create a really simple tuck spot. Buttons are such a fun way to decorate and add a little bit of dimension, and I really liked adding the buttons on top of her cards because she does scan her cards and she has actual like textiles, lace, and buttons, and so it looks really nice to just add even more. Okay, so I have a couple more basic ways to decorate these pages up before we move on to the signatures. So here I cut an old vintage game piece in half, and I'm using it as a tab. I thought this was kind of a fun way to include that. And then here I am going to be using one of these Pictionary cards, and I just glue around two edges to create a tuck spot. Vintage buttons are such a fun way to add something, with dimension in your junk journals. So I am actually just making an embellished paper clip, and I am using some hot glue, the paper clip, and a little piece of paper as the backing. And this is just a really fun way to incorporate that button into your journal. And it's functional because you can clip something on like a journaling card or an envelope, maybe a glassine bag. So guys, if you want more ideas on decorating pages, be sure to check out the third video in this trio. This is just showing you some of the different things that I go over in that video. It's a lot more in-depth than what we just went over, but I did want to make sure to show you, just a few ways that you can decorate your pages with the super basic supplies. So you can always take these ideas and make them your own. Okay, guys, so now we will move on with the inserts. So of course I wanted to utilize the lace that comes in the kits, and by the way, if you didn't get the kit, this lace is very affordable from Mattis Lace and Trimming, so you should definitely check that out if you haven't already. But I am actually just going to put the lace on with my hot glue. Normally I would sew it on, but once I tried this out with hot glue, I actually really like it because it's so quick and it sticks really well. I always use those little lace trimmings as like little tabs on pages because I really like to use all of the supplies that I can. And I think they look so cute as a little tab. I also like to use bigger pieces of lace and fabric as pockets. That's something that I've been loving for a while now. But you can also use bigger pieces of lace as like a little tip-in or as a little flip up where you can do like some secret journaling underneath. And I just hot glue the very top of the fabric, and then I just keep the rest kind of hanging there, and so you can flip it up to reveal. You can use larger pieces of lace as tuck spots on the side like that. Finally done decorating and adding lace, so now I am basically going to create two signatures or inserts. So I just go through my pile of finished pages, and I have 20 pages total here, so each signature will have 10. And I just like to mix up the size of pages, so sometimes I'll have like a shorter page and then a longer page and then maybe an envelope or a bag. I just try to kind of keep it interesting. And decorating definitely is the longest portion of journal making for me, so depending on what you like the best, you can spend the most time on that. So once we have our pages into signatures, we can go through and just make sure that you like the order of the pages. Sometimes I find that I don't like how two pages look together, and I'll just kind of mix it up. I try to look at the open pages as a whole spread, and I try to like imagine like, would this flow with this side over here? And if not, then I can change it around. So I just do a little flip through here just to make sure. I double check, no, I like triple check everything actually before I make it permanent, because it's going to be much easier to change around now than it is once we have everything sewn in. So I'm just going to flip through this other signature, make sure that I like the order over here as well. Once you're happy with the order of your signatures, or inserts, you can go ahead and grab all of your materials for binding. I have an old book that I punch holes into. I have my needle, and I just make sure that the eye of the needle is big enough for most of the trims or string that I use for binding. I'm using embroidery floss today. And you can also use a waxed linen. I will have my favorite linked below. I have paper clips and I am using an awl. And as always, you can use a tack or whatever you want to poke holes. So now I'm going to use my paper clips to hold the signatures together really well. And you don't need to use a binding template for this because the placement of the holes, it really doesn't matter. We are just sewing this together. If you don't feel confident with not using a binding template, you can use the signature binding template for the regular journal that I have included. I am just going to evenly space the holes. I am punching 3 holes, one in the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom. And I just space those out as even as I can. You really don't have to worry about this part being perfect. I have chosen to use embroidery floss for this journal, and I'm going to measure it out by measuring 1.5 to 2 times the length of the journal. I'm going to do an easy pamphlet stitch, and so you're going to start on the inside middle hole to the outside, and then you will go in to the top hole from the outside to the inside, and then out the bottom hole to the outside, and then you're going to go back in through the center hole where we started, and you can tie the 2 ends together. Definitely make sure that everything is pulled really tight before you do tie those 2 ends together. I'm going to cut off the excess, and then I will do the same to the second signature. Once you do this stitch a few times, guys, it's so easy. You can definitely do it in your sleep. Okay, so I have both of the inserts or signatures, I know I keep going back and forth, tied, and I'm going to add this charm to the second because I did leave some of that string hanging down. Fit these inside the dory and we can adjust that binding on the inside. So I'm just going to slip the inserts underneath each side. You can also adjust your elastic if you have chosen to use one of those closures as well. I'm just going to kind of wrap it around and tighten that up on the inside. I also just retie the embroidery floss so that it's tight and it's holding those inserts in pretty tightly. I do like using elastic on both because it is a little bit easier to adjust and it's going to be more flexible. So I decided I wanted to add a charm, of course, and so I am just using a few charms that I had along with the little heart that says made with love. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to open up the little jump ring here on the end of this swivel clasp charm, I think it's called, from Tim Holtz, and then I will tighten that up once I have my charm on there. And I'm just going to add a couple more little charms that I had in my stash to get this really cute little chunky charm, and I am going to add it to the dory. I do have an in-depth tutorial on making charms and tassels on my channel, so I'll have that linked below if you want to see that. I had so much fun making this junk dory. I have so much fun filling these up, so I'm going to fill this one up now with some of the ephemera pieces that I had out. Different little message pads and guest checks and index cards and things like that. Tags are actually my favorite thing to fill these up with. So I hope that you guys have fun making your own. I hope that this tutorial was super helpful to you, and I would love to see what you create. I hope that if you create something, you will share it on Instagram or Facebook. You can use the hashtag JunkTrunkKit or JunkTrunkKitNovember to share those with me on social media. Alright guys, I will see you later. Bye!